Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. We'll turn our attention to something a little different, maybe not completely, because we'll still get his opinion on what's going on here. We're joined now by Dr. Andrew Pocock, who is the British High Commissioner to Nigeria. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, we're just discussing politics and before now, and very interesting time in our political history. What is your impression of what's going on here?
Well, firstly, I think the most extraordinary thing has happened in Nigeria. What we've seen is not just a political change. I think we've seen a political earthquake. It is a remarkable development. I think Nigeria has joined the ranks of mature democracies. So we shouldn't underestimate, and I don't think any Nigerian I've ever spoken to does underestimate, the scale and quality of what's happened. That transition is remarkable. It was democratic, it was peaceful. We now have a new administration, a new president and vice president sworn in. And I have to say that I was at President Buhari's inauguration last month, and the British Foreign Secretary came, the American Secretary of State, and many African heads of state came to it. The president made the most astonishing, ambitious, analytical, and indeed self-critical inaugural speech I've ever heard from a senior Nigerian politician. It is remarkable. So that is in itself an extremely good thing. What it has also done, of course, is I think he recognizes as well, it's raised the bar. It's lifted people's expectations of what this new government is about and what it has promised to deliver. And I think we now need to move to the delivery stage.
What part of that speech sticks out for you?
I have to say that, much of it. The president looked at the country self-critically. He looked at the security situation, particularly in the Northeast, but not just in the Northeast. He looked at crime and at instability in the Middle Belt, in the Delta. So he looked at it pretty plainly and said, this is not where we want to be. He looked at governance, both at the federal level and at the state level, and he made some very interesting observations about the federal government not wishing to interfere in the governance of the states. I mean, that is, the states' issues, but at the same time, acting as a, if not a referee, at least as a sort of element of oversight to make sure that states were being managed properly and public money was being managed properly. He looked at the international agenda, which I must say, I think one thing that the new administration has done is started very strongly on the diplomatic agenda. The first thing the president has done is visit his neighbors. The second thing he did was invite his neighbors to Abuja for a summit about the Northeast. He's been to the G7, where he met Angela Merkel and our own Prime Minister and other G7 leaders. And he's been to South Africa, where I think it's important not just for African Union purposes, but to rebuild the diplomatic relationship between Nigeria and South Africa. They're the two powerhouses of the continent. They need to work together. That's a very strong, well-focused start. I think what people are now looking for, people want more of this. People are looking for the domestic agenda to develop.
I'm excited when you say it's a strong start, and almost everyone will be looking to get in the dividends of all of those moves and efforts he's done, going to his neighbors, talking about the Northeast specifically, and also identifying the problems. What do you think they should be thinking of doing in moving forward? Now we have an assembly that is almost embroiled in its own start. Some would say it's a false start for the assembly. For the president, he's still not interfered. So keeping to his words that, look, I will not interfere, even though people have been asking him to come into the fray. What do you expect to see in the days to come concerning the fight against insurgency in the Northeast and a couple of other places?
I think the president has defined his own agenda here. I mean, what needs to happen is, the Northeast is a very complicated issue. The key point that we've made to Nigerian friends is that the security response is only one of the many responses required in the Northeast. It's an essential response, but it's not the single one. So while the Nigerian army needs to approach this in as effective a way as possible, you need also to do a number of other things. You need to get the politics right. For too long, federal and state governments have been at loggerheads, to put it mildly. You need a more grown-up form of politics, recognizing that Borno State and the surrounding states are, essential part of the country and need to be treated as such. Secondly, you need an element of economic uplift. People up there need hope, they need the prospects of employment, and you need to address the dire humanitarian situation with almost 2 million people internally displaced. So there's an element of humanitarian as well as economic response. And the third area is working with the neighbors. This is now a problem that has overlapped borders. The neighbors wish to be engaged, and indeed Chad has been immensely helpful on the military side. So those four things, the security side, the development side, the political side, and the cross-border regional side, have to come together in a synchronized approach. I think President Buhari understands this, and the question is just to get the people and the mechanisms in place. And let me use this for a quick commercial for the UK. We want to help with this. I've just come back from a meeting in London, chaired by our Prime Minister, with our Foreign Secretary, Defense Secretary, Home Secretary at the table. We have a very ambitious offer to make to the new Nigerian government on security, on helping with the economy, its restructuring, its management, on the development program, where we're already very active here, but where we have catalytic ideas for what might be done, particularly in the north, but right across the country. And lastly, for helping President Buhari address one of his core themes, which is corruption, and indeed more than just corruption, organized crime, which not only damages the reputation of Nigeria, but exports harms to its neighbors and indeed to Europe. So there's a menu of things here that we're looking forward to starting with, and we just need people in place that we can work with.
Okay, Mr. Pocock, impressive that you brought up that commercial, because I was going to take you to that.
Yes.
Having talked about the new administration and what you've seen so far. But let's begin with that last matter you talked about, the fight against corruption. Now, yesterday the president rose from a meeting with the state governors, and he talked about recouping or getting back all the stolen funds that are believed to be taken across board to other countries. How would the British government help in getting these monies back?
I think the simple answer is in any way we can.
Can you break it down a bit?
Some of this is requires good old-fashioned police work. What we would need to do is work closely with the federal authorities, with the EFCC, with the federal police, with the Nigerian government in other aspects, to learn as much as we can about what they know, and we will help, as will other administrations in Europe and the United States, to try and trace funds like this. As you know, General Abacha's stolen billions were tracked down to banks, I think, in Switzerland, and the Swiss government has been very active in returning a lot of those monies. So I think that the question, this is an important question, but it's a multidimensional one, as you'd expect. Part of the issue is to trace and return stolen monies, but that is only the tip of the iceberg. The real question is to break up the systems, routines, organizations, individuals that contribute to the leaching of Nigerian public money overseas. And even more important and difficult, I think, is to assault the mentality that regards public money as a free good and effectively drives large-scale corruption. Now, that is an immensely complex business. And I mean, I'm not here to give advice to the President of the Federation, but it just seems to us that to tackle grand corruption is a bit like, launching a war on the Russian front, as it were. If you do it across the board, you're unlikely to succeed. The way to do it is to pick areas of primary focus and zero in on that. So if you're looking at military reform, it might be an idea to look at procurement. If you're looking at reforming the oil sector, it might do to look at revenue diversion, money that never reaches the Federation account, never mind oil theft. So to break up the great corruption cocoon into project-sized bites in which you can focus on particular difficulties. And I think what's important is that nothing succeeds like success. If you begin to make an impact, if you begin to challenge the networks, and more importantly, the attitude, and you begin to show that impunity, the ability to steal public money and get away with it, if you can show that impunity is no longer the norm, then things will begin to click in a different direction. So a strong start, but a focused start, I think, is the key to this.